They say good things come in small packages. Let's put that to the test with Anbernic's smallest handheld to date, the RG Nano. Join us as we unbox, overview, test the emulator's performance and see how the games look on this tiny display. Let's get started with the unboxing. First out of the box is the user manual, which is in English and Chinese. Next we have the Anbernic RG Nano, which we will show in more detail shortly. There's a keychain, which you can use with the RG Nano to keep it on a zip, strap or keyring. Next there is a USB Type-C charge cable. And last but not least, there is a Type-C to 3.5mm audio converter cable, which you can use to connect headphones or speakers. The Anbernic RG Nano is available in 3 colours, blue, purple and red. They measure 2.79 by 1.69 by 0.66 inches and weigh only 75 grams. The low weight is impressive, with it being an aluminium alloy case. It's not much heavier than average size egg, or 2 slices of bread, or 4 compact discs to put it into context. The display is a 1.54 inch IPS with a 240 by 240 resolution. Despite its low resolution, there are handhelds with lower resolutions, including the Game Boy series, right up to the advanced model, which was 240 by 160. On the front is a classic D-pad, 4 gaming buttons and select and start. On the top are the 2 shoulder buttons, and in the middle is a USB Type-C port. The port is used for charging and has a nice LED charge indicator around it. You can also use the included converter cable to convert the 3.5mm jack for external audio. This does unfortunately mean you can't charge and listen to music on external sources at the same time. On the right side is the power button, which doubles as the menu button when tapped. And there's a slot for your micro SD card. The D-pad is surprisingly comfortable to use, though a little inaccurate in the heat of the moment. The gaming buttons are quite small, but after spending a bit of time using them, they're not that bad and are responsive. You can't grip the RG Nano, and instead you need to rest it on your fingers, which is quite comfortable for short periods of time. The Anbernic RG Nano features the ARM Cortex-A7 dual-core processor running up to 1.2 GHz. There's 64 megs of DDR2 RAM, and for storage there's 64 gigs via the micro SD card. You can use a card up to 512 gigs. It is powered by a 1050 mAh battery, which lasts up to around 2.5 hours depending on usage. We did our own test and got a similar battery life to what Anbernic stated. We are basing our review on the latest version 1.0.1 of the firmware, which has some improvements over the shipped firmware. It includes some RetroArch emulator cores as well as ported games. We have a guide linked in the description for how to update the firmware. It's very easy to do. You first boot into the G-Menu 2X frontend, which lists all of your emulators from Atari Lynx up to PlayStation 1. Selecting a system will bring up a list of your games. Select one and it will run the respective emulator and load the game. There is the RetroArch tab, which has a few emulator cores including Arcade, PC Engine, Mega Drive and SNES. There is also a clock function which remembers the time even when switched off. It's a nice addition, though perhaps having the screen on all the time is not great for battery life, but you can fully shut it down if you wish to. As well as G-Menu 2X, there is a second front end called Retro FE. This is a more visual front end, and you can have game box art instead of plain text lists, for example. There are a few themes that you can use. Overall it works well, though I felt it was ever so slightly laggy on some themes. The emulators have a nice feature where if you have previously played the chosen game, you're prompted to resume exactly where you last left off, or start the game as if playing for the first time. Top marks here for including this feature. You can access the in-game menu via a quick tap of the power button. From here you can change the volume and brightness as well as save and load states. You can also change the aspect ratio, which is normally not an importance, but on this 240 by 240 pixel display, some have a higher resolution. A good example is Crash Bandicoot 2 on GBA. We can see changing aspect ratio between scaled, the most accurate to the original, shows the full game screen, but has top and bottom borders, while zoomed uses more of the display but misses the sides. Stretched uses the full display and misses some of the sides, and cropped misses a lot of the sides. This will vary between the original display resolution of the console, so see which works best for you depending on the type of game, for example. It is worth mentioning that Black Sabbath has hinted that Garlic OS custom firmware may be coming to the RG Nano. No other details have been announced as yet, but we know from his previous releases on other handhelds that it should work very well and is definitely worth installing if it does get released. We will make an install guide when it's available, so subscribe so you don't miss out. The processor has been used on a few handhelds previously, so we know the performance of it already. We can run up to the PlayStation 1 era, but some games on that platform may not work very well. We will spend a few moments testing some handheld and console systems to see how they look and play on this tiny retro handheld. The Game Gear, original Game Boy and Game Boy Color all share the same 160 by 144 pixel resolution. You can select between scaled for original size and stretched to make it full screen. All the games naturally run just fine with no issues at all. The Neo Geo Pocket runs very well at the scaled aspect ratio, and it's not worth stretching, zooming or cropping for a few extra pixels. As you would expect, all of the games run great with no issues at all. The WonderSwan Color has a wider resolution, so scaling does mean some top and bottom borders. It depends on the game what aspect ratio to use. For this game we can see zoomed works well as it's a racing game and the side of the tracks are not so important. It is also similar for the GBA with its wider screen. As we saw earlier, using scaled shows the full original display but you have the borders. Zoomed mode is perhaps the best to use, but it can also depend on the game. And now onto the consoles. These have a larger native pixel resolution than 240 by 240. This means games need to be downscaled, zoomed or cropped to fit on the display. The Master System and PC Engine's native resolution is not far off the RG Nano, so you can use scaled, zoomed or cropped depending on your preference. As we move on to the 16-bit systems with the SNES and Mega Drive, we see larger native resolution supported. The scaled resolution has smaller top and bottom borders and should be fine for many games. Stretched is actually not too bad. Cropped and zoomed are okay depending on the game you're playing. For PlayStation 1 it is a mixed bag. You will find many games are not running at full speed for a start. I think you would see improvements with the custom firmware though. What's more of an issue is the display. Despite the native PS1 resolution of 320 by 240, it's internally upscaled to 480p, which can make text very hard to read on this small display. I would say some games are fine, but don't buy this specifically for PS1 gaming. The RG Nano is an interesting console. When these review samples arrived, everyone in the office was queuing up to try them. The initial feedback was, I am going to buy one of these for my child, or this is great for when on the train, etc. We do get this feedback from other products, but not as many as what the RG Nano did. I had the exact same initial feelings, but after spending some time using the RG Nano, my opinions have changed a little. Maybe it's my age, but after an hour of using the handheld, my eyes were starting to strain looking at such a small display. My eyesight is okay, it's not perfect, but I don't have this issue with usual size handhelds. It is something to be aware of if you do have eyesight conditions. The RG Nano falls into the novelty category for me. It's more of an occasional handheld for quick gaming sessions that is incredibly portable and storable when not in use. It is an instant attention grabber. Show it to someone and they will be hooked on the range of playable handheld and console systems on such a tiny device. For the RG Nano being your main sit down and play extended gaming session handheld, I could not honestly recommend it. Instead, you should buy a traditional size handheld. You can get a My Mini Plus or Anbernic RG 35XX for a similar price and enjoy a larger screen, longer battery life and faster performance. Despite a few complaints, the RG Nano has a definite charm about it. And guess what? There's now one in my pocket ready to play at any time. You can learn more and order your Anbernic RG Nano from us at DROIX.co.uk and DROIX.net for international orders. Use the code RGNano5OFF for a 5% discount on the checkout. That wraps up our RG Nano review. We hope you have found it useful. If you have not already, please take a moment to subscribe so you won't miss out on our future videos. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.